Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are in the country today. Welcome to, I guess, the first virtual Spring Chief Learning Officer Symposium. These are unprecedented times, but it reminds us of our capacity for compassion and our determination to overcome these obstacles. The University of Maryland Global Campus is happy to host Bright Horizons and entHealth as they share with us how driving increased access to education can help boost the power of your organization. I am proud to introduce Alan Robbins, Director of Product Marketing at Bright Horizons, and Dr. Hap Aziz, Director of Learning at entHealth.
And good morning, everybody. Hello, this is Alan Robbins. Good to be meeting virtually with you all, and looking forward to 2 or 3 great days of events over the coming days here. Hap and I are very happy to be talking to you about increasing access to education this morning, and thanks to UMGC for their sponsorship of that event. Before we start, just a very quick introduction to Bright Horizons EdAssist Solutions. Bright Horizons overall serves around 1,100 clients globally, and we help clients bring their very best performances to work every day. We do that by supporting their work-life needs, their financial wellness, and their career growth through a range of solutions that includes on-site childcare centers, dependent backup care services, and educational benefits. Now, those educational benefits are called EdAssist Solutions, and they're now available to over 6 million employees across the US. So that makes us really by far the biggest provider in this space. And we categorize those programs then into 4 major groupings. We manage many corporate-wide enterprise-level education assistance programs. These are often what are referred to as tuition programs, but they've really expanded far beyond traditional degree-based programs to offer a much wider choice of learning options. But all in, it's the framework really of a broad-ranging benefit which is available to all employees. Then over the last 5 years, we've really seen a wide range of more innovative programs, targeted programs added, which address specific learning and talent needs. They may be role-specific or skill-specific. And then a big part of these have been companies that in turn have been adding targeted learning programs, which are really aimed at delivering exactly the type of talent that you need for your employees or for your business. And that's quite often done in partnership with select education providers. So for example, maybe an RN to BSM program in the healthcare field, or a program aimed at giving contact center employees perhaps the business skills they need to move into leadership positions. Another big category of that targeted learning that we've actually now set apart because it's been so important over the last few years is frontline education. And that aims to boost engagement, retention for those key customer-facing operations, manufacturing staff perhaps, with an education that's fast and simple and low cost as well. So we're going to talk about all those types of programs in our case study today. There's just one other education benefit you'll mention there, worth mentioning and perhaps in passing because it's becoming increasingly popular, which is student loan repayments, really around helping with recruitment and financial wellness by supporting employees who've invested in their own education. So obviously with the changes in the CARES Act, that student loan repayments are now tax-free, at least until the end of the year. So there's been a good deal of interest in adding those programs. So that's a little about the programs we'll be covering today in a more generic sense. So now let's see hear from Hap with an introduction to entHealth.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you everyone for joining this virtual session. This is new for many of us in some regards in terms of not being face-to-face and being able to get the feel for the room. I am so appreciative of being here. So again, my name is Hap Aziz, and I am with entHealth, which is the largest not-for-profit healthcare organization in the United States. You can see we were established in 1973, but we have a history that goes back to the late 1800s. There were 2 brothers in Michigan, and they were both doctors. one brother started what eventually became entHealth, and actually his work spawned a number of healthcare systems in the US. But the Seventh-day Adventists back then felt that healthcare was lacking, and simple things like getting fresh air, sunshine, eating well, exercising, those were keys to the foundations for good health. And it wasn't just that there should be medical practice after the fact of disease, illness, or injury. The other brother was looking at nutrition and saw that people in industrial areas, cities, people that did not live on farms, didn't have a great source of good food to start their day. And so he founded what became Kellogg's, so that they were actually trying to provide healthy breakfast foods for the population. So the two brothers there had a very big interest in health. You can see that we have over 80,000 team members across right now our 130 facilities in 10 states. We're serving nearly 5 million patients, and right now in these times, our patient makeup has changed quite a bit. We are watching the developments of COVID in all the states that we're in right now. We have a little bit of good news in that it so far is not as bad as we had planned for or anticipated, but we stand ready to handle surges as they happen in various places in the US. And we're very happy to be partnered with Bright Horizons in our EdAssist journey and the way we equip our team members to further their education.
So we're going to talk a little bit today. Hap mentioned that COVID-19 has obviously had a huge impact on what's going on at the moment. So we are absolutely going to touch on that in a moment, and perhaps look to get some thoughts from you all as well as to how that's playing out for you. In a more fundamental sense, so let's just think about, as we think about increasing access to education, what's the business case for doing this? And there's we look at three main areas perhaps that we focus on. Anecdotally, in conversations with our clients and feedback from employees, we hear all the time how important education is to them. Employees value education. It's important for their skills development. They value it because it gives them the skills they need to grow. You see this stat here, 93% of employees report that that's important to them. And that's particularly so when you look at younger employees. The stat that I always like is that 64% of millennials say that they would pick a job with strong development potential over one with regular pay raises. And we've just done some research which shows that for Gen Z, younger employees again, that absolute interest in education and development continues. So employees are interested in it from that viewpoint. There's also a business focus here in terms of retention. We know that employees that are engaged in an education program will stay longer with an organization. Employees tell us that. 94% of employees say they will stay with a company longer if that organization invests in their learning. We also see it in data from our clients. So you look here, we see overall about 40% less turnover in among employees who are in an education program compared to those that are not. And then finally, we see it in terms of increased internal mobility. So that's either lateral moves or promotions. So we cited here the Lumina case studies. These are often cited for good reason. You'll find them online very easily. They did 4 case studies, a bank, insurance company, hospital. And they tracked long-term impact, and they saw improvements in both lateral moves and promotion rates. And we also see it in our client examples again. For example, we did some work with Aetna, and they saw a 27% increase in promotion rate for tuition program participants. So those are some common metrics which support the case for investing in education and expanding access. You're going to see a net positive ROI for adding skills, retention, internal mobility. Now, those are some of the ideas that have been around for a little while. There's a couple of newer things that are just coming up that I wanted to touch on very briefly. One of those is diversity and inclusion. We're seeing clients increasingly prioritize D&I and then viewing education as a great way to achieve those objectives. So this data shows the percentage of adults by race who have been able to achieve a degree. And it really reflects a stark fact of life in the US today that many of us are aware of, perhaps, that there are structural, there are historic, there are economic barriers which reduce the opportunities for minority groups to achieve a degree. And this in turn limits their ability to advance and our ability to have truly diverse organizations. We know that educational qualifications are often a requirement for career progression. You often need a bachelor's degree for many roles, for example. So these barriers will actually impede your organizational ability to grow a diverse workforce. So increasingly over the last year or couple of years, we've been seeing that employers are actively trying to address this imbalance through education. They're structuring their education and learning programs to really improve access. And in turn, they are really increasing advancement opportunities for diverse candidates and diversity at all levels then of their organization as their leadership becomes more diverse. So,
and I do want to, Alan, I do want to add that this is a big initiative for us now, and we're seeing a lot of our minority population groups wanting to take advantage of advancing their education through the programs that we offer with edAssist.
Wonderful. Yeah, exactly. Many of our organizations, it's an increasingly important metric which we're measuring for our organizations to be able to track against that. So I would encourage you all, if you're thinking about this, take away some of the ideas we're going to discuss today. They can support your D&I initiatives. If you're not already in touch with your diversity and inclusion team, I would absolutely recommend that you open that conversation because they can be powerful allies. As you probably know, their role is to be change agents, and they often have a direct line to senior executives, influencing your C-suite and so on. So encourage you to think about how you're working with your colleagues in D&I. The other trend which is important to be aware of is really driving down costs for education and thus making it easier to increase access, is that colleges are now more eager than ever to work with employers and adult learners. And that's because of the simple demographic fact that the traditional high school base declines because of baby boomers kids who are really aging out here. So online delivery is reducing costs for education providers, opening up more efficient models, and the net result is that there's a great range of cost-effective education options available. And I'm going to give credit here to UMGC, to all the other schools that have really been at the forefront of delivering high-quality education to the adult learner in a remote setting at a time and format that works well for that learner. So we've been talking about this to our clients for a while. This is actually a sort of a pre-COVID-19 slide, but we think that this trend, this impact will only be accelerated by COVID-19, as we'll talk about that in a second. So the takeaway here is that there's never been a better time for you to engage with education providers and see what they have to offer. Now, the caveat here is there are a lot of education providers. There's a lot of schools out there that want to talk to you. And part of our role at edAssist is certainly to help our clients sort the good from the bad there, and the wheat from the chaff, if you like, and but the opportunities for high quality, low cost education will absolutely continue to grow.
Two things I'd like to add, Alan, is starting our partnership. We're now entering the 4th year of our partnership with edAssist, and let me amend that. 3 things I want to say. The first thing is a lot of the information that Alan is sharing was information that they shared with us, edAssist shared with us up front in terms of data, things that we could expect. And there were elements among our leadership that were skeptical. Oh, these numbers look great, but we know what our retention is. We don't know that it will change that dramatically. So in the past 3 years, what we've seen is the data is real. We're experiencing it. So that's been a joy for our leadership. The second thing I want to mention is our leadership is very traditional, and in terms of learning experiences, they were skeptical about having a network of schools, especially schools that provided a lot of learning in the online space. And what we're seeing now after, again, 3 years of being in the program and now having team members who have graduated various programs, they're seeing that the quality of the schools through our EdAssist partnership is very high. We're very pleased with that. A little bit of background on me. Before coming on board with entHealth, I was in higher ed for 20 years, very much in the online space. So I was not one of the skeptics, but I'm very pleased that our leadership is seeing the value in online and virtual education. And the third thing is when EdAssist talks about being able to broker or leverage their partnerships for the benefit of the organization, that is very much true. For me, it's been very helpful when I get calls, cold calls from education institutions, for example, to refer them to EdAssist to say that we're working in partnership, and so that EdAssist can maintain and manage things. But the ability for EdAssist to advise our team members is something that we could not do. There's, unless we created a department whose sole role it was to get to know hundreds of institutions across the United States, there's no way we could bring that value to our team members.
That's great to hear. Thanks, Hap, for sure. So let's talk a little bit. Okay, so the world has changed over the last couple of months, and let's talk now about the impacts that we see in terms of what's been going on with COVID-19. And I'm going to ask for a little technical assistance here. I'm thinking that we will be able to see the chat from all of you, and we would love to get your thoughts. You see the question at the bottom here, which is what is the biggest impact of COVID-19 on learning and development in your organization? Hap and I are going to discuss a couple of things that we've seen, but if you have other things, and we can enter those in the chat where everyone could see them, I would love to get your thoughts as well and share those. So 3 big areas where we think that COVID-19 has had a huge impact. Let's start with reskilling. And this was already a trend that was happening. At the start of 2020, LinkedIn did a survey where they found that 43% of learning and development leaders were planning to launch some kind of reskilling program in the coming year. So this was, almost half of organizations were already thinking about this. Now, COVID-19 has absolutely increased that. What we see is that we have organizations who are thinking about how their employees should be, many more of their employees should be moving into new roles, perhaps reskilling, and then outskilling for roles outside of their organization, which may be something which will happen here. And we see it, this is happening in many different ways. We've seen it in our own organization here at Bright Horizons. We've had our operations staff who work with the childcare centers who have begun to move into contact center roles for our backup care program. We've reallocated people there, different set of skills. We've done that very quickly. CVS is a client of ours. They've been doing some great work, funnily enough, in partnership with Gap, with Hilton Hotels, with Delta Airlines, to take on some of their furloughed employees. Who would have thought that would have happened, 6 months ago? And then all sorts of new redeployments. Not all of which will require new education, but a lot of that will. And I think you've been seeing a lot of that at Advent, correct, Hap?
Yes. So I'm looking at the chat right now, and a lot of the comments are right in line with what's happening with our organization. We are having to reskill employees. We created a redeployment task force, and so employees that we've pulled out of facilities, we're giving them specific training to move into 12 different roles that we've identified. A lot of the orientation work and the new hire training that we had that was live now has become virtual. My team is in charge of developing that training, that development for them. We're doing certainly a lot in terms of virtual meetings, but it's the reskilling and redeploying people for different roles in L&D that's really hitting us very hard. My team being involved in learning and development, we've just been working a lot harder now since COVID-19 hit, and a lot of the demand on the organization is what affects learning. I saw one comment there about their video production team being their MVP. We're doing the same thing. So much of the work that we're doing now, we're recording video. We created a PPE, donning and doffing training that was specific to the reuse of PPE, which is something, personal protective equipment, which is something that healthcare systems don't typically do. They dispose of masks and things, and because of the shortage, we're having to create new procedures around that. So it's just really exciting work, being able to repurpose and turn on a dime. But we're finding that right now, L&D for our organization certainly is at the center of much of what's happening.
Yeah, and we are similarly having many of those conversations with our clients about how they can go and look in there, seeing a lot of similar trends emerging. Second point is that employers are really helping employees to take advantage, if you like, of this downtime that some of them have. So just as in the Great Recession, you know, so employers and employees are looking at ways to use their spare time to help get education. Now, the difference here is that employers, I think, are even more concerned about their employer brand. Everybody is thinking about the recovery. They hope that they will need employees coming back very soon. So we're having lots of conversations about how employers can keep education available at a reasonable cost to their furloughed or laid off employees and helping them out with that. The third point is something you touched on earlier, Hap, a little bit, is this idea that there's a great increase in comfort with online learning. Now, this was already happening. We did a survey of 30,000 participants in education assistance in the middle of last year, and we found that over 80% of them already did some of their course online. And that's all age groups. That's not just young learners. That's right across the board. So now with COVID-19, we're doing everything online. You know, we're doing this event online. We are doing so much communication, so much learning, and we think that this higher comfort level will absolutely drive more and more adult learners to online asynchronous learning modalities, which really suit their busy schedule and their pocketbook. And again, Hap, I think you've seen that play out a little bit at entHealth as well.
I have.
So,
and it's, yeah, no, go ahead.
Go ahead. So really, I think all of these things really relate back to our general theme of increase in access. Hopefully it's sort of a mini recession impact here with more educational activity than we did after we saw after the 2008 downturn, quicker pickup, so without those permanent layoffs. But certainly we're seeing that in terms of increase in access, we think that COVID-19 will actually accelerate some of those trends as well. And thank you for all those comments in the chat. We really appreciate those and sharing your thoughts with others here. Mm-hmm. So just a final point in terms of increase in access, and then we'll talk a little bit about, in more detail about some of the ways that entHealth have put this into and seen this play out in real life. But we really think that education assistance programs can help to support learning and development overall. And they can do that by providing access to different subject matter and learning formats, which perhaps your internal teams can't offer. There are so many options available that it's sort of impossible to match those internally. So certainly you can look outside to broaden the range of learning available. Second point here is let's talk about money. You know, typically an education assistance program or a tuition program is funded through, not through L&D, but through benefits, the benefits departments, or through perhaps departmental budgets. But it doesn't need, in effect, it's free money for learning and development because it doesn't need to come out of your budget, which is always something to be thinking about. So leverage that as well. The final point in terms of supporting L&D strategy is really that you can structure these programs to guide employees to areas where you have ongoing skills needs. And you can do that at a macro level, for example, with an RN to BSN program, an option, or at a sort of a much more micro personalized level through using academic coaching. And we'll talk about some of those things as well. So again, that's a lot of ideas, a lot of trends. Let's see now how that's played out in real life for entHealth.
Thanks, Alan. So there are a number of objectives that we have as an organization. And first and foremost, we're very interested in seeing that our team members are nurtured, they feel cared for from a professional context and their professional growth. So one of the things that it allows us to do is establish ourselves as being competitive in the market. We see the data. Josh Burson will tell us over and over again that team members want to join an organization that feeds their growth, that they're not even interested right now, especially millennials, are not interested in joining organizations that don't have a systematic plan for professional development. And that's one thing our partnership with edAssist allows us to do. We want to make sure that our nursing staff is properly credentialed. And one of the most popular programs we have as a healthcare organization is moving people from their RN credential to a BSN degree. It helps us feed magnet status at some of our facilities, but it's a goal that many of our nurses have, and being able to access a number of RN to BSN programs that have different flavors and different benefits is a very big positive for our team members. One of the things that we want to do is grow our team members, and we want to be strategic in the way we're growing our team members. Traditionally, certainly before our edAssist partnership, professional development was a conversation between the team member and the manager, and it didn't get outside of that room. And so if a team member said, I'd like to further my education, perhaps get a master's degree in X, Y, or Z, the manager would say, well, it's in our budget, so let's go ahead and do it. Now what we're being able to do is leverage data that we're getting across the system, predictive data that's telling us where we're going, and that leads us into this second half of the slide, the whole leveraging data piece. So we're able to see where we want to be, what needs we'll have as an organization, and we're able to then share that with our team members that are looking to further their own education. So we can target roles for them and target the training for them. We're looking at our results, and the results in terms of what our employee base is doing now and what they've been trained in and where their gaps are. And we're able to then direct them appropriately, better managing our resources. We're able to group students together. Sometimes we're creating cohorts of students. Sometimes that might be a benefit in a number of ways. And so we're offering cost savings through consolidation and certainly other program offerings. I think at some point we'll talk about education access program. And then of course we're in 10 states, so it's not a one size fits all option for us in terms of education. Local populations have their local needs and preferences, and through edAssist and their network, large network of schools, we're able to meet those needs and preferences that our team members are having, and that's a tremendous benefit to them. So when we look at our programs that we have, we think in terms of currently what we're doing, but we also look ahead to the future. So right now, this has been our foundation. Tuition reimbursement is the core of what people think about when they think about education, furthering their education. But we don't want it to be just about tuition reimbursement. We do want our team members to think about the future, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But still, we have team members referring to the program as tuition reimbursement, and I'll point out that it's a lot more than tuition reimbursement. One of our current programs is our partnership that we have with entHealth University, which is our sister institution, and we're able to do things like offer direct payment for RN to BSN, or work with entHealth University to customize content. But I want to point out that it's not unique to entHealth University, that many of the institutions in our partnership through edAssist are able to meet those needs as well. We are able to, as part of our policy, provide tuition reimbursement towards certification. And we have a cap on our tuition reimbursement that's tied to the IRS maximum per year of $5,250. After that, it becomes a taxable benefit to our employees. But one thing that we're learning is that we've had a lot of employees that traditionally would look towards getting a BS degree or an MS degree when the skills they want might have been able to be obtained through certifications instead, which is much more cost effective. But the benefit then is they're not maxing out on their cap, which means they can use more of the money for other certifications. So that's something that's been good for them. And then the Education Access Program, which I just touched on, it's brand new, I think, both for EdAssist and for us. We just launched it. I'm losing what day of it was within the past few days or yesterday, or it's within the past week. We just launched the Education Access Program, which is a very resource effective way for our frontline team members to get a BS degree. And I think we'll touch on that a little bit more. But briefly looking at the future, we want our employees to have better access to higher level degrees because we want to support leadership development from a credentialing perspective. We are looking at enhancing our communication on why we are doing this and what the value is to our team members and to the organization. And so communications is a big part. And again, we've been in this relationship now entering into our 4th year, but I have to tell you that prior to entering into the relationship, our separate facilities managed tuition reimbursement programs separately. So there wasn't even any consistent messaging. We want to continue to streamline the application process from a technical perspective, which EdAssist has allowed us to do, but we want to go further and create this idea that there's esteem, esprit de corps, that it's a big deal to become part of the education access and EdAssist program piece. And then of course we want to expand access to our employee base. There's so many ways to look at that. One is the better we are at managing our resources, the more employees, the more team members we can impact with the same level of resources. And then the better we are at tracking our metrics of the effect this has on our organization, the more likely leadership is to expand our funding for these types of programs.
What I like about the programs that Advent have in place is that you really have done a great job of having a sort of a broad general program that meets a lot of needs, but then zeroing in on, okay, here are some specific needs that we have within our workforce and aligning programs with them. And so the Education Access Program is just the latest one of that. It's a small group, 4 high quality schools. We've really worked hard to drive down costs there. So UMGC is one of those schools, and Western Governors, WGU, another one you may be familiar with. We're also using a new way to do general education courses through a program called Fast Track. And so the net of that is that we're looking at savings of around 70% compared to the average cost of a bachelor's degree in the US. And the main objective there is to drive costs down, obviously, but to give these frontline team members an affordable, a free education, and to really take out of the picture the need for them to pay up front as well. So we've removed that barrier for them. Out of pocket is a barrier for less paid employees. And Hap, I think you can talk a little bit to the fact that, you know, your non-clinical employees are as important to AdventHealth as the nurses and the clinical staff we tend to think about naturally.
Right. We about 55% of our resources are spent in the clinical areas, but that means close to 50% of our resources for furthering education are not in clinical areas. So that is important to us. And one thing I want to say about education access, as we were reviewing the signing on board as an organization, one of the things that was very appealing to our leadership was that the 4 schools, UMGC being one of them, those 4 institutions are high caliber institutions in the online space. That gave our leadership a great sense of comfort in signing on. I'm waiting for my screen, a little bit of jitter. Okay. expanding access. So I talked a little bit about the alignment from a strategic standpoint, so that our organizational needs are being met as we leverage our partnership with edAssist, certainly with AHU, our sister school, but also through the education access programs. So this is giving us a great feel for how we can move our employees, both clinical and non-clinical, through the education process to meet our needs. Again, I mentioned expanded certification offerings and leveraging those earlier, but edAssist has been a great partner in helping us identify what certifications might fit and be potential either replacements or enhancements to the education that our employees are in the process of obtaining or already have. And then we want to be able to centralize our planning. I mentioned a while, not too long ago, that our individual facilities were doing this on their own, and there's still a little bit of that, but now more and more we're actually looking at pooling resources, having a centralized review board to be able to determine who really should be getting access to further education funding and how that will benefit the organization. And then, so we're looking at 403 graduating employees in 2019, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. As I mentioned, we've been in this partnership. We're now entering the 4th year, which really, if you think about it, it's just starting to cycle people through that have started their education while we started the relationship. So we're going to see that number increase, grow dramatically over the coming years. And the statistics that Alan shared very early on, especially around retention, are very, very true for us. We have noticed that the employees that tend to be the highest drops are the ones that, and here we have a slide on performance. Thank you, Alan. The employees that have been, there we go, the less than 2 years tenure, those were our highest dropping employees. But those are also employees that are involved in the education programs, and they are retaining extremely well. And that last line, 3% turnover compared to the 24% non-participants, that 24% is an actual number for us. In healthcare, turnover is quite high, especially on the clinical and the nursing side. And that 3% number of turnover under the education programs at edAssist, that's a real number comparing apples to apples. So we were comparing the actual employees that turned over at the 24% rate and those same employees in education through edAssist are staying with the organization. So we're really happy with that. You see the average spend per student has dropped as well, and that's a happy thing for us.
Right. Yeah, that's always good to see. I mean, you know, it's great to grow the program, but we also need to look at, okay, what can we do at the same time to see if we can bring down the average cost per student. But again, that ROI is, in terms of the retention piece, I think will continue to be important. Again, COVID-19 notwithstanding, I think that retention will continue to be a key issue. So let's put it out to the wider audience again. Question for you guys at the bottom is, you know, if you want to share in the chat what practices, one great practice perhaps from your own organization about how you have been able to increase access to education, share those with your peers. That would be wonderful. We think about it, touching on a few of the points here, is we do think that flexible learning is a way to, the time barrier is critical for employees going back to school. Many of them want to, but just finding the time to do it, and the flexible learning formats and the ability to learn when it suits you. And again, you know, the schools we partner with really have understood that. So that's one piece. Think about those flexible learning formats and different types of learning. Definitely direct payments. Take that out of the picture. Asking employees to prepay for their education and then wait for reimbursement is a huge barrier to participation, especially for lower paid employees. So So there's different options that you can take on there in terms of making direct payments to education providers. And Harp, I think you've definitely seen some of the impacts of the educational coaching piece at entHealth also.
Yes, and I cannot speak highly enough about that. It's a funny thing. The most difficult transition piece that we've had during our relationship with Bright Horizons has been cultural within our own organization. People used to pick their institution based on things like, my friends went there, my colleague had a good experience there, my relatives like this school, or it's the one that's down the street. So none of those are really great ways to decide if the academic program is the best choice. And so we've had to be very deliberate to encourage our team members to engage the advising component with edAssist. And it's a really easy thing to do from a technical perspective. There's literally a button on the screen where our team members can schedule an advising session, but we've had to work really hard internally to get our team members culturally around the idea of not making up their mind before getting into edAssist about where they want to go, but waiting until they've talked to their advising coach at edAssist before they decide. So that's been a bit of a struggle. We still have some ground to make up in that, but to a person, people who are taking advantage of that are finding great benefit to that.
Thank you. Yeah. So again, I see some wonderful stuff in chat. I'm conscious of time here. We're going to stay on. We can certainly do take Q&A. Let's just wrap up with I'm not going to share them in detail, but I'm just going to highlight them for you because they're in the deck. We focused on healthcare, but then we recognize there may be many folks from outside of healthcare here. So there are 3 additional case studies which will be included in the slides. T-Mobile, where we worked with them to increase access among their frontline employees, increase customer satisfaction. We put together a network of 5 schools there, and you see that we really drove higher participation in the program, similarly high retention rates, and great engagement from their employees. Lockheed Martin, more of an engineering workforce. They recognized that certifications and non-degree programs were important for that group, so they added a selection of very business specific. They engaged with their line of business managers. They added a long list of certifications which were updated on an annual basis to make sure they remain business relevant. And we've seen tremendous happiness with the program there and an increase in 5,500 participants. So an increase in participants there. They've also, interestingly, there's a D&I aspect there as well. Engineering very heavily male focused, and they've actually seen higher use of the education program by female workers. So they were very happy with that as well. And then finally, I touched on it earlier, financial wellness. Aetna really wanted to address and provide employment to their lower paid workers to get them into a place where they were financially secure and could focus on their work. And a similar thing with a network of schools, prepayment for programs. So doubled participation in the program, 8% increase in retention, great feedback from employees there as well. So all of those stories are also are included in the deck. We are just about at time. I want to thank Harp for his great insight here. And if it's okay, I'd love to see if we can stay on and just take some Q&A. But if people need to drop now, they absolutely can. So I'm not sure if somebody can help us out with the Q&A here or whether.
Yeah, I got you. We've got some questions. If we can't get to them, in other words, we get kicked off, we'll go ahead and make sure that we get these answers to you. But I'll go through them here for you guys real quick. From Lisa Coburn, in the agenda, one takeaway: why no-cost degrees are compelling for employees and affordable for employees. Can you please give examples of low-cost, no-cost degrees?
Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. I mean, the Education Access Program, in effect, delivers no-cost degrees. Most employers can fit those in certainly under the $5,250, the $5,250 cap. Then you can present the opportunity for an employee to get a no-cost degree. And and no cost in terms of no money up front. And HAP, I think the other piece here is we talked a little bit about being able to do that in an affordable or a sort of a reasonable time span as well, because free is no good if it takes 10 years, but we thought a little bit about that as well, right?
That's very true. So it is one of the main reasons for us to get involved with Education Access was to be able to provide a no-cost option to our frontline employees. If they are even minimally engaged and move through the program, they will go from high school diploma to bachelor's degree with nothing but our contribution. They won't have to have anything out of pocket. And there are several options for payment at the upper levels of the program, but through Fast Track, I think it's costing us $1,300 a year for essentially all you can eat, and so students can get through their general eds very, very efficiently.
Okay,
correct.
Katie Giles. Good. Katie Giles asked the question. Just want to make sure I understand correctly. Have you guys found a way to fund certification programs through tuition reimbursement in a way that satisfies the IRS? This is a constant problem for us. What sorts of certifications are you able to support this way?
We're not allowed to give tax advice, but the short answer is many of our clients are doing that. So we would be happy to. It does not seem to be a problem, but with the normal caveats around providing tax advice.
And from my perspective, I know that we're providing funding for certifications. I could get more detail from our finance team because I don't know the details in terms of if there's some requirement, but I haven't seen any problems doing that.
Okay, do you have any recommended programs for leadership development? There's so many options, hard to choose. That's an anonymous attendee.
So leadership development, the way entHealth handles it, we actually have a leadership development department, and they've marshaled a number of resources. We have a partnership with LinkedIn Learning, a partnership with Harvard Management Mentor. But what we do is provide the core through EdAssist for our residents. We have a very robust residence program that basically is our feeder system for our leaders. And all of our residents go through, they get their master's through an EdAssist school, one of the partner schools. And for our leaders, we've actually doubled our cap that we pay for and cover beyond the IRS thing, because for us that's a priority. So that's kind of how we approach that.
Okay. Tax, this is from another anonymous attendee. Tax cap, 5250. How about for master and doctoral degrees? What's the time cap? Is there any expectation of a time cap? Federal mandates for 2 years for critical skill degree or master and doctorate.
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, is it a question around tax or is it a question around internal policy decisions, do you think, Ed?
I don't want to ask the question in a different way, but I think what they're asking here is, if it's 5250, that makes sense for an undergraduate degree, but it doesn't make sense for a doctoral degree. And how do you do that? Or a master's degree, because of the time expectation of getting those degrees under that cap.
From a policy perspective, we double the annual cap to 10,500 for master's or doctoral level degrees. So we eat the tax piece. We basically adjust that for the employee.
Right,
Okay.
and we work with plenty of clients who pay over the 5,250 and do the tax calculations for them and so on. But I think that's obviously an IRS decision beyond our control a little bit there.
And I need to say also that a lot of the accounting piece really happens as part of the technical implementation of the EdAssist system for us. So for example, if an employee signs up for a school and they spend $8,000 on some bachelor's level courses in a year, and the employee is aware that they're going to be on the hook for what's beyond 5250, that's all tracked in edAssist. So there's no hiccup. There's no, the employee's got to pull out a credit card and pay for part of it while they're signing up online, through edAssist. It happens very seamlessly. So the employee will pay for the overage, but it's something that happens very easily for them through the magic of technology. I know that's kind of vague, but it's so magical for us. I don't have to know the details.
That's usually the answer. I think you nailed it. This is from Stephen Casper. One of the issues in K-12 education is access to online learning capability, the lack of internet, for example. Are you seeing this in the corporate setting? And if so, how do you begin to address it?
Alan, you might, I can speak that, yeah, you might have broader view on that.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, we've certainly seen that for lower paid workers, you may want to put in place some kind of a technology lending system for workers, because it's pretty much essential, whatever you say, to have a laptop and internet access at home. So we do see that in certain workforces with frontline lower paid employees, it may be something that employees at least want to be aware of and ask that question. Not as great an issue. My wife's a teacher here in the Boston area, so not as great an issue as it is in K through 12, though.
Yeah, and from a policy perspective, that's something we're considering of adjusting the policy, where we would provide hardware and funding for internet during the course of a degree program. We're actually looking seriously at that. We do have a handful of folks that are not well connected.
What advice do you give for hardworking? No, I'm sorry. What advice do you have for working with a D&I professional to expand education? When does it make sense to reach out and start the work together?
My conversations with D&I folks in general is that they are very open to having conversations and then aligning it with the objectives. They typically have fairly clear objectives lined up. And I would say I would go straight to a straightforward conversation about what are your stated objectives for D&I, what can education do in terms of that. And I think the key place to go to there is increasing diversity in your leadership ranks. That seems to be a sort of the easiest target as a first one to go for. Hap, I don't know if you have additional thoughts on that.
So in our structure, D&I sits under organizational effectiveness, as does L&D. So literally, I get to walk down the hall and directly engage a colleague when we're having D&I conversations. And the D&I piece sits in the same department as recruiting. And that's how our conversation started about strategic alignment, because recruiting was getting all the future data. What positions do we need to have filled? And then recruiting took on D&I with answering the question of who are we going to fill those positions with? And then so it was very easy for me to jump into that conversation and saying, okay, now how do we align this from a strategic standpoint?
And I want to apologize. I forgot to name the person who asked for that question. It was Mike Prokopik. So sorry about that, Mike. That concludes our presentation for today. I'd like to thank Hap Aziz and Alan from Bright Horizons. Great presentation, guys. Thank you very much, and thank you for those of you that sat in here and stuck out with us. Take care and be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.